So we'll talk about phonetics now. Phonetics as a study of speech sounds. Phonetics is the linguistic analysis of speech sounds, their production, transmission, and repetition. Accordingly, we have following classifications. Articulatory phonetics the first. This is the branch of phonetics that deals with the production of sounds. Acoustic phonetics. This is the branch of phonetics that deals with the transmission of sounds. And auditory phonetics. This branch of phonetics deals with the reception and perception of sounds. Articulatory phonetics. Now, mechanism of speech production. So there are three mechanisms involved in the production of speech sounds. They are airstream mechanism, phonation process, and oronasal process. Airstream mechanism. Airstream mechanisms are responsible for the creation of airflow in the vocal tract and are needed to provide the energy required for the production of speech sounds.
Now, the following are the three airstream mechanisms involved in speech production. The first is pulmonic airstream. So certain sounds are produced by manipulating the pulmonic airstream. That is the airstream that is initiated by the lungs coming into the vocal tract. This can be of two types: pulmonic ingressive and pulmonic egressive. The pulmonic egressive involves the air exhaled from the lungs, and pulmonic ingressive involves the air inhaled in the lungs, like
pulmonic ingressive. So
that is pulmonic ingressive. It involves the air inhaled into the lungs. So that's about the pulmonic. Most sounds are produced with the pulmonic egressive airstream.
Now the glottalic airstream. The air being exhaled from the lungs may be stopped in the throat by closure of glottis. This closing of glottis traps a pocket of air in the vocal tract. If this reservoir of the stationary air is then manipulated in the production of sound, it is called glottalic airstream mechanism. The vocal tract is completely closed so that for a brief moment no air escapes from the lungs. If the closed glottis is raised to push the air up and outwards, ejective consonant is produced. For example, in languages like Hausa and Amharic, if the closed glottis is lowered to create a small vacuum in the mouth, implosive sounds are produced. For example, Swahili Bodaga. Now the velaric airstream mechanism. Tell me about that.
So the velaric airstream back of the tongue seals off air from the lungs to create a relative vacuum. It is refined by the backward and downward movement of the tongue. When the stricture is released, the air rushes in, creating a click. Clicks stop the air only in the oral cavity. So clicks stop the air in the oral cavity, and pulmonic air continues to nose. Now the phonation process. The muscle of the vocal cords in the larynx can behave in various ways that affect the sound. The effect of this series of vocal cord states is called phonation. It is an activity in the larynx. Now tell me about the sounds that are classified following the type of phonation.
So voiceless sounds are produced with the vocal cords far apart and there is no vibration. Whisper sounds are produced with the vocal cords less far apart and there is no vibration. Breathy or murmur sounds are produced with the vocal cords slightly together and the anterior portion is closed in the breathy murmur sounds and there is vibration. Now the voiced sound is produced with the vocal cords held close and there is vibration. Creaky sounds are produced with the vocal cords in the posterior portion of the vocal cords is closed and there is low vibration. So that's how various sounds are produced based on the types of phonation.
Now the oronasal process. The speech sounds are produced when the the moving air is somehow obstructed within the vocal tract. Vocal tract consists of three joint cavities, namely oral cavity, nasal cavity, and the pharyngeal cavity. What happens to the air in these cavities is called oronasal process. Now, organs of speech. The organs involved in the production of speech can be divided into three groups: the respiratory system, the phonatory system, and the articulatory system. The respiratory system. Respiratory system consists of the lungs, the muscles of the chest, and the trachea. When the walls of the lung contract, they contract by the action of the respiratory muscles. Air from the lungs thus is pushed out.
Yes, when the walls of the lungs contract by the action of respiratory muscles, air from the lungs here is pushed out. The air that passes out through the trachea is utilized for the production of speech sounds. Thus, the function of lungs and the trachea is to provide the airstream required for the articulation of speech sounds. So that was the respiratory system. Now we talk about the phonatory system. This comprises the larynx or the voice box, which is situated at the top of trachea. Larynx is composed of three unpaired large cartilages: epiglottis, thyroid, and cricoids. And it also has three pairs of small cartilages: arytenoids, corniculae, and the cuneiform. The air from the lungs passes out through the trachea and the larynx. In the larynx is situated a pair of lip-like structures called the vocal cords or vocal folds.
Now these vocal cords and vocal folds, they are attached in front and is separated at the back. The space between the vocal cords is called the glottis. The glottis can be held shut or open by holding the vocal cords together or apart. Now the articulatory system. The articulatory system consists of the pharynx, oral cavity, and the nasal cavity. The roof of the mouth has a significant role in differentiating sounds. It comprises the teeth-ridge, hard palate, soft palate, and the uvula. The hard convex part immediately behind the upper front teeth is called the teeth ridge or alveolar ridge or alveolum. The hard concave area behind the teeth ridge is called the hard palate. The roof of the mouth then becomes soft and fleshy, and this part is called the soft palate or the velum.
Now, at the extreme end of the soft palate is a fleshy finger-like structure called the uvula. The soft palate can be lowered or raised. If the soft palate is raised so that it touches the back wall of the pharynx, the nasal passage will be closed and the air can escape only through the mouth. Sounds produced with the nasal passage closed and this way and the air escaping through the mouth alone are called oral sounds. If the soft palate is lowered so that the nasal passage is opened and the oral passage is blocked, air can escape only through the nose in such a case. So such sounds during the production of which the air escapes only through the nose is called nasal sound. During the production of certain sounds, the soft palate is lowered with the nasal passage open and the oral passage not blocked. The air from the lungs escapes simultaneously through the nose and the mouth. Such sounds are called nasalized sounds.
Tongue is an important speech organ. For the purpose of description, it is divided into three parts. The part of the tongue that lies opposite the teeth ridge. When the tongue is in a state of rest, it is called the blade of the tongue. The extreme tip of the blade is called the tip. The tip and the blade together are called the apex. The part of the tongue that lies opposite the hard palate when the speech organs are at rest, it is called the front of the tongue. The part of the tongue that lies opposite the soft palate when the speech organs are at rest is the back of the tongue. Now vowels and consonants. So talking about consonants now. Consonants are produced by means of an obstruction in the mouth by a narrowing of the air passage. Consonant sounds are described based on the following information. So tell me, explain that information on which the consonant sounds.
So the consonants are described based on the The first thing, the airstream mechanism, that is pulmonic, glottalic or velaric. The second is the state of glottis, whether voiced or voiceless. The third thing is the position of the soft palate, that is oral, nasal or nasalized. The fourth thing is the place of articulation, and fifth and the last thing is the manner of articulation. Now, based on the places of articulation, consonants can be classified as the following. The first is labial. In the production of labial sounds, the lips are involved. They are subdivided into bilabial and labiodental sounds. Bilabial sounds are those in the production of which both lips are involved. Labiodental sounds are produced with the upper row of the teeth against the lower lip. Tell me about dental sounds now.
So in the production of dental sounds, the sounds produced with the tip of the tongue against the upper row of the teeth are called dental sounds. For example, the. Next is alveolar sounds. These are the sounds produced with the tip or the blade of the tongue against the teeth ridge. Ta, da, na, la, ra, sa, za, ra. Now, post-alveolar sounds. The tip of the tongue is the active articulator, and back of the alveolar ridge is the passive articulator. For example, sha, ja. These are post-alveolar sounds. Then we have palatal sounds. The front of the tongue is raised toward the hard palate in the production of palatals. For example, ja, ja. Then we have velar sounds. Back of the tongue is raised towards the soft palate while velar sounds are being produced. Ka, ka.
Now, glottal sounds. Glottal sounds are produced in the glottis. Ha, ha, ha. So these are glottal sounds. And then we have uvular sounds. The sounds that are produced at the uvula are called the uvular sounds. Ga, ga, ga. Then we have pharyngeal sounds. Sounds that are produced at the pharynx are called pharyngeal sounds. Then we have retroflex sounds. Those sounds that are produced by curling the tip of the tongue and raising it against the roof of the mouth. Da, da. Based on manner of articulation now. So consonants are classified as follows. The first, plosive or stop. During the production of these consonants, there is a complete closure of the airstream at some point of time.
Now the affricates, the second manner of articulation. In the production of affricates also there is complete closure, but here the oral closure is removed slowly and an audible friction is heard. For example, ja, ja. Then we have fricatives. So in the production of fricatives, the articulators are brought so close together that the air escaping through the narrow space between them produces an audible friction or hissing sound. Fa, va, sa, za, sha, ja. Now trill or roll. So in the production of a trill, the articulators are brought into contact with each other a number of times, producing a series of rapid intermittent taps. For example, burro.
And then we have tap or flap. So in tap or flap, a single instance of a trill where the articulators quickly come together and go away. Ra, ra. And then comes lateral. A lateral consonant is produced with the oral passage blocked at the center with tongue but open at the sides. For example, la, la. And then we have nasals. In the production of nasal consonants, the soft palate is kept lowered so that the nasal passage of the air is open. The nasal passage is open while the oral passage is completely blocked at some point of time. Ma, na, ma, nya, ra, nga, nga, no, no. Now talking about vowels. So tell me about vowels now.
Vowels are voiced sounds during the production of which the air escapes through the mouth freely and continuously. unaccompanied by any audible frictional noise. Vowels can be classified based on the first, position of the lips, second, part of the tongue that is raised, and third, the height to which it is raised. According to the position of lips, vowels can be classified into two categories, rounded and unrounded vowels. According to the part of the tongue that is raised, vowels can be classified as the following: front vowels, back vowels, and central vowels. During the production of central vowels, the center of the tongue, the part where the front and the back of the tongue meet, are raised towards the roof of the mouth where the soft palate and the hard palate meet. Now tell me, how is it classified according to the height to which the tongue is raised?
So according to the height to which the tongue is raised, they are classified as first, high close, high or close. So those vowels during the production of which the tongue is raised close to the roof of the mouth is a high or close vowel. The second is low or open. Low or open vowels are those in the production of which the tongue is kept low. The third classification is half close. For half close vowels, the tongue occupies a position that is 1/3 of the distance from close to open. Half close. And then we have half open. For half open vowels, the tongue occupies a position that is 2/3 from the distance from close to open. Now talking about IPA. Tell me about IPA now.
IPA was devised by International Phonetic Association. IPA is designed to represent only those qualities of speech that are distinctive in the spoken language. Paul Passy formed the International Phonetic Association in 1897. Since then, IPA has undergone frequent revision. IPA is composed of letters and diacritics. Diacritics are mark near or through an orthographic or phonemic chart or combination of characters indicating a phonemic value that is different from that is represented by an unmarked one. The general principle of IPA is to provide one letter for each distinctive sound. It means that IPA does not usually have separate letters for two sounds if no languages make a distinction between them.
Now, alphabet of a language is insufficient for representing the sounds produced by humans with clarity. A letter of an alphabet may represent more than one sound, and hence a letter and a sound lack one-to-one correspondence. For example, in English, the letters ka and cha are used to represent the initial sounds. K and C are used to represent the initial sounds in the words cook and kick, though it is the same sound. Phonetic transcription is a tool made use of by the linguists to overcome this incongruence. It is the IPA symbols that are used in the transcriptions so as to make it universally accessible. Transcriptions may be phonemic, that is broad, or allophonic, that is narrow. Now tell me about those two terms.
Well, a phonemic or broad transcription is different from the narrow or phonetic transcription in that it is less precise than the latter. Slight phonetic variations are not represented specifically in broad transcription. Phonemic transcriptions use slashes as in the following example. So, /PIN. The phonemic transcription of the word pin, and rain as in REIN. Phonemic transcription of the word rain. They are written between slashes, the broad transcriptions, and the allophonic or narrow transcriptions. They use extra symbols to denote all the features of sounds like aspiration, palatalization, labialization. These additional features are represented with diacritics and listed in the IPA chart.
For example, pin, P, and then the subscript H representing aspiration. So the allophonic transcription of the word pin, they are written between brackets. Thin, the allophonic transcription of the word tin, tin, tin. Now cardinal vowels. Cardinal vowels are specially selected vowels which are used as the points of reference from which other vowels can be measured. They are not vowels of any language. Cardinal vowels are produced when the tongue is in extreme positions like front, back, high, low. This system was devised by Daniel Jones in the year 1956. Now talking about monophthongs and diphthongs. Monophthongs are vowel sounds whose quality does not change over the duration of the vowel.
Correct. These monophthongs are also called pure or stable vowels. For example, E, A, O. Diphthongs are the vowel sounds that glide from one quality to another. They are also called vowel glides. Diphthongs are called vowel glides. In the production of diphthongs, the tongue starts at the position of a particular vowel and then moves to the direction of the position of another vowel. For example, I, oi, ew, yeah. Now complex articulation. So secondary articulation. In the complex articulation, secondary articulation refers to the co-articulated consonants where the two articulations are not of the same manner. Secondary articulation is the superimposition of a lesser stricture upon a primary articulation. Now tell me about the types of secondary articulation.
So about the types, the first is labialization. It refers to the addition of lip rounding to an articulation like watta. The second is palatalization. Palatalization implies the raising of the front of the tongue, adding an E-like articulation, as in Tina becomes Tinya. That's palatalization. And then velarization, raising the back of the tongue, adding an this like articulation. I don't know, this is a consonant. For example, I don't know. Velarization, basically raising the back of the tongue. And then pharyngalization. Addition of a pharyngeal-like articulation is referred to as pharyngalization, like Nita becomes Nitha. Now talking about co-articulation, tell me about co-articulation now.
So co-articulation refers to a situation in which conceptually isolated speech sound is influenced by and becomes more like a preceding or following speech sound. It is exactly the overlapping of two sound segments. It is of two types. The first is anticipatory co-articulation. In anticipatory co-articulation, a feature of a sound is anticipated during the production of a preceding sound. For example, lip rounding in shoe. The second type of co-articulation is preservative co-articulation. It is also termed as carryover progressive co-articulation, carryover co-articulation, or progressive co-articulation, or preservative co-articulation. So in preservatory co-articulation, the effects of a sound is seen in the production of sounds that follow. Tell me about syllable now.
Syllable is a unit of organization for a sequence of speech sounds. It can be considered as the phonological building block of words. A syllable is made up of a syllable nucleus, which is often a vowel, which is obligatory, with optional initial and final margins, that is, the consonants. The initial margin consonants are called the onset, and the releasing consonants, they are called the onset or the releasing consonants, and the final marginal consonants are called coda or the arresting consonants. The nucleus and the coda together are called rhyme, and nucleus and onset together are called the body or core. Nucleus is also called peak. Though the syllable nucleus is usually a vowel, some sonorants, that is, speech sounds that are produced with a continuous airflow, they can also act as nucleus.
Yes, some sonorants can also act as nucleus, like ma, na, la, ra. Now syllables are classified into open and closed syllables on the basis of the absence and the presence of coda. Those syllables with coda are called closed syllable, and those without coda are called open syllables. Now, ambisyllabicity. It is a phenomena in which consonants have been analyzed as acting simultaneously as the coda of one syllable and the onset of the following. Now, suprasegmental. In addition to the isolated phonemes, which are smallest distinctive segment of sound, connected speech is characterized by continual modifications or alternations in stress and other like features.
Some phonemes cannot be easily analyzed as distinct segments but rather belong to a syllable or even word. For example, tone, stress, prosody, intonation, etc. These are called suprasegmental phonemes. Now, neutralization and archiphony. So, phonemes which are contrastive in other ways may not seem to be contrastive in some environments. In the environment where they do not contrast, the contrast is said to be neutralized. Thus, the concept of biuniqueness between phones and phonemes would be violated. Biuniqueness is a requirement in which a given phoneme, whenever it occurs, must unambiguously be assigned to one and only one phone. In such cases of neutralization, instead of specifying a unique phoneme, the technique of underspecification is used.
An archiphoneme is an object used for underspecification. So, in cases of neutralization, instead of specifying a unique phoneme, the technique of underspecification is used. Here, an archiphoneme, which is an object, is used for underspecification. It is an abstract phoneme which has just the relevant features. Now, talking about acoustic phonetics. So, the branch of phonetics which deals with the physical characteristics of sound waves which carry speech between mouth and ear deals with acoustic phonetics. Now, sound waves. So, sound is potentially audible disturbance of medium produced by a vibrating source. Sound waves are the fluctuations in pressure that travel through a medium. This fluctuation causes air molecules to compress together, that is compression, and spread apart, that is rarefaction.
So, compression and rarefaction. Now, waves are of two types, longitudinal and transverse sound waves. Longitudinal waves involve the displacement of a medium parallel to the propagation of the waves. Sound waves are longitudinal waves. Transverse waves involve the displacement of medium perpendicular to the propagation of wave. Transverse waves are the displacement of medium perpendicular to the propagation of waves. Another classification of sound waves includes periodic and aperiodic sound waves. Periodic sound waves have regular self-reinforcing repetitions, that is, they have periods, that is the time required to complete a cycle, and these periods they occur at regular intervals and are perceived as tone. Now tell me about aperiodic waves.
So, aperiodic waves, on the other hand, are random and non-repetitive. Such sound waves are perceived as noise. Sinusoidal waves or sine waves or simple waves are periodic waves with one frequency component, but complex waves consist of waves that differ in the frequency. Real-world sound waves appear to be and are in fact much more complex than sine waves. When two or more sine waves combine, they create a more complex wave. Henceforth, complex waves can be decomposed into simple component waves. Now, addition of two or more different sine waves to create a complex wave is called synthesis. Now let's talk about frequency, period, and amplitude. So frequency is defined as the number of cycles per second. It is measured in hertz, that is Hz. Tell me about period.
So period is the time required for a complete cycle. It is often measured in milliseconds. After a period, you have amplitude, which is the degree at which the peak is displaced. For sound waves, the unit of measurement of amplitude is decibel. Now let's talk about pitch and loudness. So frequency determines the pitch. Frequency is a physical measure and pitch is a psychoacoustic measure. Frequency is the basis of perceived pitch. The subjective sensation of pitch is equal to the change in frequency. Likewise, the amplitude determines the loudness. The subjective sensation of loudness is equal to the change in amplitude. Now let's talk about fundamental frequency and harmonics. So fundamental frequency. Tell me about fundamental frequency.
Fundamental frequency is the wave with the smallest frequency. The wave with the smallest frequency will define the main or the basic repetition frequency of a complex wave. This frequency is called the fundamental frequency of a wave. And harmonics. So harmonics is also termed as overtones. The sine wave frequencies present in the complex wave other than the fundamental frequency are called harmonics. Harmonics are the integer multiples of the fundamental frequency. Now let's talk about resonator, filtering, and natural frequency. So an object that contains a body of air that is set into vibration by a source is called a resonator.
And each resonator vibrates at maximum amplitude at a preferred specific frequency range. This is called the natural frequency. The natural frequency of a resonator largely depends on the size and shape of the resonator. The resonator acts like a filter as it lets through frequencies with greater amplitude near its natural frequency. The vocal tract cavities act as resonator and modify the sound produced by the vocal cords. Now, formants. So formants are the frequency peaks in the output signal which is produced as a result of the shaping of the input signal by the vocal tract resonators as complex filters. Formant frequencies depend on the position of articulators. The constant movement of the articulators during speech creates variable vocal tract resonators and hence variable formants.
Alright, now let's talk about spectrum and spectrogram. So spectrogram, it is the graphic representation of sounds in terms of their component frequencies. This plots frequency on the x-axis and time on the y-axis. Now spectrum, so each frequency component of a complex wave is represented as a single frequency value on a sound spectrum. This plots amplitude on the y-axis and frequency on the x-axis. Now let's talk about burst, noise, and voice. So burst. A burst is produced by stopping the airflow, letting the pressure to build up, and then releasing it. This is heard as a popping sound. Now let's talk about noise. So tell me, what is noise?
Noise. It is produced by narrowing the vocal tract to create turbulence heard as hissing sound. Now voice. Voice is produced with the repeated stopping and releasing of the airstream at the vocal folds. Now voice onset time, VOT. It is a feature of the production of stop consonants. It is defined as the length of time that passes between the release of a stop consonant and the onset of voicing, the vibration of vocal cords. So it is defined as the length of time that passes between the release of a stop consonant and the onset of voicing, that is the vibration of the vocal cords. Even though Edgerian has mentioned about this concept long back, it became popular in a context described by Ling and Wang. So depending on VOT, phonation is of three types. Tell me about those three types.
The first is simple unaspirated voiceless stops. So VOT is near zero in simple unaspirated voiceless stops. The voicing of the following sonorant begins at or near when the stop is released. The second is the aspirated stops. The VOT here is more than zero. The greater the VOT, the greater is the aspiration. The third is voiced stops. So the VOT in the voiced stops is less than 0. The vocal cords start vibrating before the stop is released. So remember, the VOT in the voiced stops is less than 0. In aspirated stops, it is more than 0, and it is near 0 in the simple unaspirated voiceless stops.